and do you want to know why? It's because I moved house. We were gone for like 4 weeks without internet, so that's obviously put things a little bit behind, and it's kind of why we haven't had any videos go up recently. If you want to see the new house, we did a little bit of a walkthrough recently with the new setup as well, so if you want to see all the new gear that we have, all the new improvements, the videos of that will be linked in the description, and there's also going to be, it's probably going to be the video that was uploaded before this on the actual video segment of my YouTube. So go check it out if you want to see the new house. Let me know what you think of all the new gear and all that stuff, and let's get on with the Wisp guide. Wisp was introduced in update 25.0 to critical acclaim. Originally, a lot of us had speculation that she was going to be a subversive, very stealth-based frame, with maybe some support or healing elements to her, or just Rule 34 bait if you read what the Warframe Reddit had to say. But we were all wrong. Well, maybe not on the Rule 34 element. Wisp is a magnificent frame and probably one of the smoothest frames I've played in a very long time. She mixes a range of versatile abilities to devastate enemies, buffing allies, teleporting all over the place, while generally being a force of nature. These standards she brings only excel when you start combining your abilities and learning the finer details. What I would say is that Wisp is definitely not a frame you'll be able to grab as a tremendously new player. What with the way her damage works and the way of actually acquiring her, you do need to have some time in the game to get the most out of her. But if you do buy her, or if you do get the opportunity to play her, she's a frame that has a very low level to get into, a very low introductory level, but a very high cap to get the most out of. So in this video, we'll be taking a look at her basics, how the best to play her as a newer player, and how to get the most out of her in general. Generally speaking, Wisp is one of those frames that is a great fun frame to initially pick up, but does offer a very deep level of complexity should you wish to try something a bit harder and maybe get the most out of her. So easy to pick up, but hard to master would be the best way of looking at her. But whether you just want to play for fun, or whether you want to go balls deep, you'll have a great fun with Wisp regardless of your playstyle. So let's go through the steps of what you want to focus on as Wisp. So at any given time, you always want to make sure that you have your reservoirs up. Regarding the different reservoirs, you'll place down the ones you feel would best fit your situation, as each one gives different buffs. Then you'll go about your business and replace them as you move away from locations, or if your buffs are falling off and you don't think you'll get back to your reservoirs in time to keep them up. Keeping these reservoirs and buffs up is essential, as it allows you to buff your ultimate, and the reservoirs themselves can also be used to reposition yourself by using your 3, which not only allows you to teleport to the reservoirs, but also temporarily stun nearby enemies. You'll notice that there is a lot of synergy with Wisp's abilities, and learning the timing or the necessity of having the different abilities up to work in tandem with each other is where a lot of the complexity lies. Combining all of that with an ultimate that is the equivalent of a Kamehameha from Dragon Ball Z that you can cast on the move, that gets supercharged when you hold your left mouse button and gets buffs from your other abilities, you'll notice very quickly that Wisp is a bit of a force of nature to deal with, and she is very, very strong. Although you may not realize it, but the 4 isn't where her necessity lies. You'll notice that you'll be using a mixture of all your abilities together to get the potency out of them. So you can kill a lot with your 4, you can teleport with your 2 and your 3 to have a positional advantage, and you can use your 1 to buff allies. And then your build will reflect the ability that you want to focus more on, and we'll cover that more in a bit. Wisp is obtained from the new rope list encounter on the reworked Jupiter tile set. This encounter is a pretty straightforward one, and it's actually a really cool one, and it's probably one of the most unique and interesting assassinations for any planet that there is currently. The only downside is to actually get this assassination, you need to have progressed quite far through the storyline up until the Chimera prologue to actually be able to get to it. Sorry, kids. I will hopefully have a video up on the rope list in due time to show you how to beat that encounter, but the actual obtaining of Wisp is probably the hardest part of actually being able to play her, because it does require you to either then buy it with platinum or go really far into the game. Now, the drop chance of each component, the main blueprint is a 22.56%, the chassis, the neuroptics, and the systems all share a 25.81% chance drop. And because the encounter itself is quite quick, you should be able to farm this up quite quickly once you get to it. The only weird thing is that it does require one of the new materials, which only comes from the amalgams that spawn on Jupiter, and this is called Hexanon, so keep that in mind. In terms of the stats that she comes with right off the bat, her fine assets contain a 300 health pool at level 30. She has 225 shields at level 30. And considering the type of frame she is, she has an awful lot of armor with 150 armor right off the bat. She also has 300 energy, so a very large energy pool right off the bat as well, with a sprint speed of 1.2, although I don't know whether you can call that a sprint speed, more like a float speed. She has a Madori and a Vazarine polarity in her default mod spots. She has no Exilus polarity, and she also has a Naraman aura polarity, which gives you a lot of avenues for being very relevant with things like corrosive projection and other aura mods. Moving on to Wisp's abilities, we're going to start by looking at her passive. It's a bit of an innate passive, but it's a pretty cool one to look at nonetheless. This passive is basically every time you are in the air, you gain an aura around you that turns you invisible, and at that point, enemies will no longer target you. So the longer you're in the air, the longer the enemy won't target you for. So not only do you have that element of teleportation through your other abilities, but you also have something really cool that allows you to escape situations where you may be in a bit of a kind of shit situation. Wisp's 1 is called Reservoir. Okay, so Wisp 1 is super cool. Remember shamans from World of Warcraft, how they summon totems and all that? Wisp's 1 is kind of like that. Pressing your 1 will cycle through 3 different mote elements, which are shown down in the bottom right of your HUD. Holding your 1 will then summon a mote of that element. Each element has a different buff, and you can have as many or as little of them as you choose, up to a maximum of 6. If you summon a 7th, you will destroy the first one you made, and that first one will be replaced with the 7th, allowing you to cycle through as many of the different buffs as you so choose to meet the standard of mission or the situation you're in. The great thing about these reservoirs is you can have multiple wisps with multiple reservoirs up at any given time. And although the potency of the buff you pick up is always going to prioritize the strongest buff, the duration will be refreshed regardless of whose reservoir you enter. So if you pick up a stronger buff and that starts running out, you can go into somebody else's reservoir and get your duration reset by that one. The elements of these motes and their buffs are the following. The first mote element you have is Vitality, which is the one with the red symbol. This generates a buff which gives you bonus health and health regeneration based on your power strength. So the more power strength you have, the more health you get, and the powerfuler the health regeneration becomes. The second mote is a haste mote, which is the one with the green element, so it's this one here. This is, as it may sound in the name, is an attack speed and a movement speed bonus, which is generated by power strength. The more power strength you have, the faster your attack speed and the faster your movement speed will become. The final element for your motes is shock. The shock mote is kind of a funny one. Once summoned, it'll become a pylon that will deal small amounts of lightning damage in an arced electric bolt type dealio. Not only that, but that same lightning bolt effect will be put onto the player as a buff similar to the previous buffs of the other elements. This lightning bolt will deal a small amount of electric damage based on your power strength and stun that enemy for a small amount of time. I would highly recommend using this in choke points should you wish to stop enemies coming down a corridor or something of that nature. It's kind of unique, and it is also a good addition to put in for defending stationary targets or just choking points in general. The effect range of the pods, which is the ring around them, is generated by your ability range, as is the effect of the lightning of the electric mote. The actual duration of the buff you get is based on your power duration, and the potency of the buffs is based on your power strength, as mentioned previously. Wisp's 2 is called Will-O-Wisp, which kinda sounds like something you order from a takeaway. Yes sir, I'll have that with extra fries, please. But this is a super cool ability that can be used in one of 2 ways. Let's just summon some dudes here. Basically, you tap your 2, and it'll send out a clone of yourself that travels in the direction you face. This can then be used to distract the enemy, who will then target that instead of you. So you're noticing a bit of a trend here where there's a lot of ways of Wisp to distract fire from herself and get her to attack other things, or just to not attack her in general. This will travel for 4 seconds and disappear. However, if you activate your 2, if you press your 2 again during the process of the travel of that Wisp clone, you will then jump to the location of the clone itself, which is super cool. If you hold your 2, the Wisp travels at a much faster rate. and if you release your 2, then it automatically takes you to the location of that Wisp as it finishes. This can be cast at any given time, even off the ground, and it is a super quick way of transporting, and again, adds to the element of mobility. Also, if you end up using your Breach Surge, which is your 3, which we'll be covering in a little moment here, and you have your clone out, your clone will then generate a Breach Surge from it as well, giving you 2 Breach Surges rather than 1. You'll very quickly notice here that a lot of these abilities are going to start synergizing with each other, so keep an eye on them and see how they work together. And the third ability is Breach Surge. As mentioned previously, this ability synergizes with both your Will-O-Wisp and your Reservoirs. But let's take a look at it on its own first. And this is kind of a bit of a oh crap ability that you cast when you're maybe in a bit of trouble. When casting your 3, you send out 6 Surge Sparks that emanate outwards and blind enemies with how fancy you look. Yes, I mean, we all know how fancy Wisp looks. If a blinded enemy is struck by damage, they will potentially release an additional surge that will then travel to the nearest enemy based on your power range, and it will carry a portion of that damage with the damage it deals to that next enemy. So it gives you sequential damage based on the damage you deal to the initial target. So we remember what this does with Will-O-Wisp, how you cast your Will-O-Wisp and then you cast your 3 and it'll cause 2 versions of that Will-O-Wisp, Breach Surge to spawn. That's cool and everything, but it also synergizes with your Reservoir. So if you have a Reservoir up, let's just take for example this bad boy here. If you target the location of a reservoir, a reticle will appear like so. You do need line of sight for this to work, bear in mind, and it will not go through objects. But if you have line of sight to a reservoir, you can tap your 3, and it will send you to that location in a teleportation manner, and then cast your Breach Surge in a similar fashion as it would do normally. So not only do you have your teleport from your 2, not only do you have your invisibility, not only do you have a decoy, but you also have another teleport in the form of your Breach Surge. What more could you do to keep Wisp alive? I mean, if you die somehow, maybe there's something to be said for maybe not paying attention to the game. The range of your Breach Surge is based on your ability range. The damage multiplier of the second surge and the initial damage of the initial hit is based on your ability strength. And the duration of the blind is based on your ability duration. Keep in mind, unfortunately, blinded enemies are not set up for executions. However, they are still open to stealth modifier damage. So they are basically treated as if they have not detected you, which is pretty cool. So you can still do that extra bit of damage to them. Soulgate is Wisp's 4. This is the ability that would make Solaire from Dark Souls very jealous and give even Goku from Dragon Ball Z a bit of an inferiority complex. Wisp tears a rift in time and space and literally hurls a sun at her enemy like so. Kind of like a Kamehameha beam, if you will. The beam is very interesting because it has a lot of micro adjustments that can be made, and it's not just a super death beam. Well, it kind of is, but there's a lot of stuff that can be done with it to make it a bit more interesting. The initial beam has a 40-meter range, which is super cool, and will initially deal a large amount of heat and radiation damage per second. This beam damage gets stronger for the more enemies that are in connection with the beam itself. So let me just go grab some energy a second. So you can scale this damage somewhat, and a lot of people will say that the damage of this beam isn't tremendously that good, but with the range it has, as well as also the girth of the beam, you can cleave down a lot of enemies, especially at the lower levels with it, even without modding so much for damage, as well as not even including the potential extra damage you can get from having synergy with your other abilities. So as mentioned previously, this does synergize well with your other abilities. Activating your reservoirs will give this different effects. So if we place down one of each type, like so, when you are affected by all 3 of the reservoirs, these will affect your beam in different ways. Vitality and Shock Reservoir will add a 25% damage boost to the beam, and the Haste Reservoir will add a corrosive proc to the damage you deal, helping to strip armor, which is kind of cool. You can also left click whilst firing to increase the damage, much like you would do with a channeled weapon. You can also then hold down your 4 to help improve the damage as well. And welcome to the builds segment of this video. As always with the build that we show, it's always down to your personal opinion. Any build that we show is subjective to what I've researched, and you should always use your initiative and do some experimentation to what would work for you. So as we move in, the first build we're going to look at is a more focused build that you can aim towards once you've played a little bit. The second build will be a more generalized, newer player-friendly build. With any build, the aura slot is always down to personal opinion. I just like corrosive projection because it's always going to help your team. Now, Wisp in general is always going to benefit from a well-rounded build. Have a bit of duration, a bit of range, a bit of strength. I would say that strength is something you're always going to want to prioritize a little bit more, as Wisp does very well at buffing your allies, and the potency of those buffs is powered by your power strength. And if you're going for power strength, you'll also then get more potency from your soul beam. You'll also get your breach to deal more damage and that multiplier to get higher as well. And that multiplier should never be understated because it is a very powerful thing to be able to deal that extra percentage of damage to the next enemy affected. So power strength is a key factor. So when it comes to power strength, I generally go with Intensify, Transient Fortitude, and Augur Secrets. These work really well initially, and I think you can get more than enough power strength above 200. Although I could also suggest adding in Power Drift in the space of the Excellus slot. Now, talking of the Excellus slot, Air Advantage is one of the newer mods, and obviously not everyone's going to have it at this stage, but it's pretty easy to get. This is used currently for me because you have that stealth element whilst airborne. Having the reduced gravity is going to allow you to be airborne for a bit longer, allowing you to stay invisible and then not be targeted. But if you're not focusing on evasion or moving a lot, then you can subsequently replace this with Power Drift to get that extra buff, get a bit of power in your damage, and it's generally going to help you either way. That, again, take it as you will, use which you think would work for you. And then in terms of the duration, you don't need that much duration as a whole, because even with Oni Prime continuity, you're going to have your buffs up for about 42 to 45 seconds with Oni continuity. Having extra duration after that is only going to then affect the distance that your Will-O-Wisp travels. So if you want to travel further distances with that, then duration is going to help you there. Now, in terms of the survivability mods are, to me, always personal preference. You can go with Vitality, Steel Fiber. I know Adaptation is not something a lot of newer players will have right off the bat, but because you already have a lot of mitigation with your base armor, you can have a very large amount of survivability with any survivability mod you put on. So some people go Vitality, Steel Fiber. Adaptation is generally never a bad choice, but obviously not everyone's going to have it. In terms of range, I think range is probably your least prioritized stat. Personally, you could probably even get rid of stretch in place of flow or streamline to be able to have your soul beam channeled for longer. But if you want your allies to be able to get back into your buff for a bit easier, as well as allowing your breach to hit a further radius, then having a bit of range is always nice. You can mix and match between duration and range to what is comfortable for you. For me, this build has worked quite nicely. It gives you a nice large buff area, as well as also giving you a nice duration on your stun, and also giving you enough range on your breach to be effective as well. And this version of the build is a much more simplified version, something that a newer player would be much easier to get a hold of. And this simplified build will probably benefit somebody who wants to learn Wisp, because you're much more generalized in terms of your stats. It's a lot better, well-rounded, so you can sample each of the abilities and have a benefit with all of them rather than just focusing on one. From this, you could then work into the element of Wisp that you would find being comfortable for you. There are gimmick builds with Wisp, however, that might be something for a different video. So hopefully you've enjoyed this Wisp guide. Obviously I'm a little bit rusty, I've been away for such a long time. I tell you, it's been such a weird thing getting back into the rotation of streaming and recording videos again. I can only imagine there's going to be many things in this that I've done wrong and people are going to laugh at me in the comments. But if this has been helpful or you've enjoyed it, please leave a comment down in the comments section below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know what you think of Wisp. How good is she? What can they do to change her? And things to look out for as well. We're going to be introducing new types of videos soon. More analytical, maybe a bit more of a reveal and debut type video. And hopefully you'll look forward to those. And if you ever want to come and join us, you are more than welcome to, as we record these on Twitch. There will be a link to my Twitch down below, and you can join these fellow people in causing eye cancer as we record these videos together. So thank you very much for watching, guys, and I will see all of you top hatters in the next guide video or whatever we do. Terror! This has been a terrible video! Woo!